they're coming from like a mom who, through 25 years, her marriage was cheated on. Yeah. And the church that we were at, like, wanted her to stay in that marriage for, like, the upkeep of the church. Because he was an elder. My dad was an elder of the church. And, like, having, like, her being feeling trapped in that situation was just so tough, like, mentally and spiritually on her. Like, where she wasn't the one that was committing adultery the whole time. Yeah. Like, he was.
You know, like, my mom has been divorced, but, like, we talked about in the earlier podcast that I was on, like, there's abuse in the home. There was also, I didn't mention this, but there was also infidelity. Like, you know, there was cheating and stuff. So, like, you know, like, you don't know everyone's story. Like, so I do think, like, there is time, like, when the church has situations like that presented to them, to be understanding, to be compassionate, to be gracious, to meet people where they are, and still speak truth in that, but there's a way to do that lovingly and walking alongside people.
Oh, yeah.
So.
This episode is brought to you by Zing Media Co. Zing is a social media marketing company that helps small to medium-sized companies and organizations that want to make a positive impact in their communities. If you're in need of social media marketing, then reach out to Zing. Contact the team at zingmediaco.com.
Hey everyone, my name is George Orihinales. I'm the executive producer of Saved and Tatted and the creator of Radio Faith. If you've been following Charles and the Saved and Tatted show for a while, then you know that this show used to be on the Radio Faith YouTube channel. But you're here now and you see that Saved and Tatted has its own channel. Saved and Tatted is still part of the Radio Faith family, but Charles and I have been planning some new things for SNT, which means it's going to grow and it needs its own digital space. Also, Radio Faith is making plans to produce 2 new shows, which will be part of the Radio Faith family alongside SNT. I'll tell you more about those 2 new shows at the end of this episode. Thanks for taking the time to check out Saved and Tatted. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell to be notified when new episodes drop. Go ahead and let us know what you think about this episode in the comment section. And if you think someone else needs to check it out, then click the share button and send them the link. Thanks again for checking out the episode. Now I'm going to stop talking because I know you're here to listen to Charles. God bless.
We're just going to be praying, bro.
All right, yeah, y'all pray for me. Hey, guys, welcome to the Saved and Tatted podcast. Glad to have y'all back. We got 2 guests returning back for another great episode. John and Micah, welcome back, guys.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys for keeping your eyes closed for that, because that was rough.
Of course, man.
That was rough.
Of course.
You're welcome, you know.
Y'all didn't see what just happened, but that was a pretty bad. That was brutal. But
whatever it takes.
Good to be here.
Hey, I'm glad to have y'all back, man. Man, John, we had you in season 1.
Season 1.
Man, and we're down to, now we're back at season 2.
Yeah.
Hopefully with some more great content. We had you early. I guess it would be earlier in this season.
Yeah.
Possibly, maybe.
Oh, okay.
So what do you guys got going on right now?
Man, just life's busy. I got a 1.5-year-old, and so just trying to keep up with her and balancing that along with, you know, church work and all that comes along with that. But yeah, just staying busy for sure.
That's what's up.
Yeah. For me, kind of the same. A little church work and also.
I thought you were about to say kids. And I'm like,
Word.
bro, wait, what? A lot's happened since the last.
This is the right
A lot has
podcast
happened.
to be
A
on.
lot has transpired.
Yeah.
No, I would say no kids, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Would have made this conversation a whole lot more fun.
This whole conversation would have been purposeless.
Yeah.
But yeah, no kids. A lot of church work and a lot of work. And so just things are really going really good. We've had a couple of conferences that do in place, so just kind of being at the forefront for those. And I'm also going to Paris.
Paris?
Yeah, I'm going to Paris for a missions trip, believe it or not.
Bro.
So, I mean, listen.
Look, we're changing the topic now. Missions, okay?
Can I give context?
Yeah. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
Real quick context.
Okay.
Our church has a campus out in Paris.
Okay.
So
Do they really?
Yeah. So it's one of our. So this thing's called 10C, which is like 10 nations. And so we've invested in 10 churches like across the globe in different countries. Right. So Paris is one of them, and they have a really big young adult presence. So we're going there to just kind of help them like lead worship. It's going to be really cool. So
That's awesome.
Really
Let me just ask you this: is the other one like in Sydney and then in Hong Kong?
Oh, this man. Honduras,
Yeah, right.
Haiti.
All the great cities.
Man,
No,
all right,
man.
next topic.
No, that's good, man. That sounds awesome.
super
That's pretty
exciting.
cool. You know, I've never been on a missions trip.
Me either.
I mean, not that. I mean, I haven't. I've only been on my walk like 5 years, which is really still baby Christian.
Wow,
But
yeah.
I've wanted to do missions, but I guess with having a family,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could get away. But
Yeah.
I would, if I was single, I would definitely. I'd be hopping on the missions all the time.
I'm also a missions pastor, so like if you
Hey,
just let me know, bro.
there we go.
Just take the family.
Yeah.
Oh,
everybody have one.
he's like, hold up, hold up. We didn't say everyone. No, that's
Nah,
pretty
it's great,
cool,
though.
man. I didn't. Well, I did know that, but
Yeah.
So when was the last missions trip y'all had?
Yeah, so the last one we went on was this past summer. We went to Brooklyn for a week. I got a good friend of mine that's, and we've done ministry for over a decade together through student ministry stuff. It's where we met, and we go to this. He was a part of the same camp that we go to, but he planted a church in Brooklyn in 2019, and then ended up kind of coming together with another guy who's from Brooklyn that was planting a church, and they kind of merged together right as the pandemic hit. Ended up kind of being the thing that saved them. But
Oh wow,
and so we got to go this past year, which was really cool because during the pandemic we didn't get to travel on, like out of state, out of country mission trips and stuff like that for a few years, and that was right when I took over the missions pastor role as well because I was just students before that, and then added the missions role, and so like. At a really weird time to take that on because anything outside of local and even the way that local missions were happening were way different. So now we're really kind of hitting the ground running as far as what would be more of a normal missions ministry and kind of being able to take some of those trips and then even more involved locally where like a lot of things locally for a few years were COVID related, whether it be food distribution, that sort of stuff. So it kind of took on a different look for those first couple of years and now really kind of getting to strengthen some relationships with some partners and stuff. We've got a big deal coming up later this month with some of our international partners that are going to be here and get to share, and we're getting updates from all of our others. And so it's exciting. We're building some strong relationships, but looking forward to kind of what doors God might open up going forward
pretty
too.
cool,
So,
man.
yeah.
that'd be awesome. I didn't realize that, and this may be kind of. Duh, you should know that, but I've always anytime I think of missions, I just think like third world country, like, but I do know that there's a lot of stuff that happens like here locally, especially like with the, weather and stuff and, floods that happen. And then, you got the freeze and all that. So I kind of knew that, but I never really thought about
Places
United,
like
like places like that.
Yeah.
Well, and you
That's
think
pretty
that
cool.
like New York, like maybe not like the financial kind of problems and stuff of like Haiti or something for for example, but like spiritually though, like one of the darkest places like on earth, like and so there's a lot of people in a small in a tight area, and the vast majority of those people have no concept of God, and many of them that do have any kind of concept of God, it's been skewed or by church or churches that are more like cults and other sorts of like things that have misconstrued the gospel, and so it's really it's a challenging place to do ministry. But man, I love Zach and Chaz, the guys who lead that church that we partner with there. They have an incredible heart for the people there, and they're doing awesome work. And so it's exciting to see God work in places like
cool,
that.
man.
So yeah.
So when do you go to Paris?
I think May.
All right.
May?
Very excited.
Yeah.
Bro, that's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be a culture shock.
Oh, dude. They
Have
don't
you ever
have
been to Europe?
a lot of black people in Paris, but they do. Oh, man. I'm just feeling a little cursed today. It's Black History Month. Let me make it.
We'll give it to you.
Don't cut that out. Oh yeah, I'm so excited. It's gonna be fun. But like, man, like you think about all these places, like they need Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like we're so accustomed to like our Western side of Christianity, like on the Eastern side of things are so different.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so like we're very excited just to come over and just share like what the Lord's been doing in our house, and also just kind of bring some of what the Lord's been doing and take it over there too.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, can't wait.
That's good, man. We were talking about your kids earlier and stuff. Is that difficult to? I mean, do you take them
go?
with you? Do
No,
you take your wife?
So like this past summer, it was kind of wild. Like, so my daughter, like I said, she's about 1.5 years old now, a little over that. So this summer, like, she was 1. Was the last, and I got to bring them to camp with me, which was great. My wife's a teacher, so it was off in the summer and able to have the family there. But then, like, to go on a trip to New York, we did a lot of walking, riding the subway, and so not exactly like the environment for a 1-year-old. And so, anyway, so like, that's kind of hard being away. This was the first time. That was the first trip I've taken since my daughter was born. That was that long. So I actually went to youth camp 4 days after my daughter was born. Ooh. Don't shame me. Everyone my wife made me go. She told me that I was going to drive her nuts if I was home and worried about camp and stuff. So, and her parents came and helped out. So it was great. But like, that was like the first like longer trip. I mean, it was like almost 8 days when you count all the travel and stuff or whatever that I was gone, like 7.5, 8 days. But yeah, and so like it was, I don't spend a lot of time away from them, so it felt like a lot, but you're so busy there, and, technology's nice now, and FaceTime them and stuff, and that sort of thing. But yeah, like it definitely is a new dynamic for, I'd gone on trips before when it was, without my wife, before we had my daughter, but like, and that's hard, like, but it's even a whole nother element, because not only do we miss each other, but then my daughter, and then now all these other responsibilities that we normally share. So it's definitely, I understand like your kind of concern that you were saying earlier, having to navigate how do you go on a trip, right? Once you have kids, and when you do that, because it's hard to just up and leave for a week, and so you got to make all kinds of accommodations and help and stuff. It's a lot more to take into consideration. So
yeah, for sure. Are you excited about it being Paris, or just a mission trip in general? Like, what is y'all's what is the mission actually?
Man, I would be remiss to say if I wasn't excited about going to Paris. Like,
I bet, bro.
I'm gonna keep it 100. Like, Paris is a city. Actually, this is the first time I'm traveling like abroad. Like, I've never been internationally before. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm excited just to go internationally in general. But I think the biggest thing for me is just that I just want to see the Lord move in a special way like I've never seen him do before. Mm-hmm. Like, I have no expectations for what's going to happen, but I just know that he's going to show up. And then, like, a part of, like, seeing him move is also seeing him, like, fund this trip.
Yeah. Please make it happen, Lord.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm really excited to kind of, like, go on this journey of, like, trusting in him and believing in his provision. Like, when it says in Matthew, like, if I take care of the birds and the trees, like, how much more will I take care of you? Yeah. And so just kind of, like, meditating on that, I'm like, Lord, like, I know you're going to show up financially for me to get there. Mm-hmm. So I can't wait to, like, walk alongside this journey and to see, like, the testimonies and the money that comes in for stepping out in faith and believing in you that I'm going to Paris to minister. So that's probably the most exciting part, just to see. I have no idea what he's going to do, but just to be able to see, like, okay, like, we're going to do something good. Yeah.
And I think it's good, too, like, kind of taking a turn into where I wanted the conversation to go. Yeah. Is, like, with you being single and being able to do that, like, no, like, seriously, though, like, John is single, so his phone number is no, but like, you being single, like, socials in the description, right? With you being single, though, you have the ability to be able to kind of get up and leave like that. I mean, I would take advantage of it, right? I mean, and with it being Paris, bro, like, being single in Paris is pretty. I mean, you're going with Paris and its mission, but I mean, let's be honest, like, that's a nice place to, just hang out, get to meet new people and stuff. Yeah. I mean, the dating world in a Christian lifestyle is I wouldn't say difficult one, but it's different.
It's tricky to navigate for sure. Especially today.
It would be hard in all honesty, it would be hard for me because my entire Christian walk, I've been married. I've been with my wife. Yeah. So I know the way my walk was before I went to church, and I know how it was before that. Yeah. So I think being able to approach something like going out of the country like that, but with God at the center of it, but still being single, there's still opportunity to have fun and be able to go out and enjoy yourself while still doing the mission.
I've been single for probably about going on 4 years now,
Like I've had like a few talking stages in between, but like to officially be in a relationship, like I've been single for about 4 years, and like I don't regret any of it. Like it has not been a wasted season for me. Like it's been just, man, when I tell you, it's just like you just get a certain freedom to do not only like the things that you love to do and discover new things about yourself and what you like to do, but also you get to see, you just get to do so much for the Lord. Like, not that you don't do things for the Lord together in a relationship, but like, man, like I'm still uncovering like gifts and talents that the Lord has given me. And I get to like explore those things wholeheartedly without having or feeling like, okay, like maybe like I should kind of hold myself back a little bit because it's just responsibility. But like at this point, like I have responsibility, but I don't have responsibility. Like I got bills, cars, all that stuff. But like I feel like my responsibility almost is to like get out there, fail, learn, jump into the boat with Jesus. It's just me and him, you know. So it's exciting.
That's good, man. So let me ask you this honest question: with you being single, if you were to meet someone, are you on the belief of finding someone who's evenly yoked as you?
Yeah. So for me, it's if she's younger in the faith, like she has to have that hunger and that ability to like, hey, I want to grow, I want to learn, like I want to have my own personal relationship with him. If that's the case, like, yeah, I feel like for me, like when I'm dating, it's like I'm always following the path of peace. So like if the Lord is giving me peace on this, and I'm going to continue to date and get to know her. And if he's not giving me peace, like there's no shame in like cutting things off and like breaking things off. I think that's where it gets tricky, like in dating in the church. Like when you date, there's a feeling that you're like obligated to that person. And I think that in the church especially, like it needs to be okay. Like, hey, if these two aren't a good fit and you know it and you found confirmation from the Lord, like, hey, like this is just not the one for me, then yeah, like call it quits. Yeah. Because you know, you never know what the Lord has for that person coming up along the way.
I could see that. I mean, for me, it's just difficult to think, not difficult to agree with you, but difficult to look at the situation just because of the fact that when me and Marissa, we found God together. I mean, I knew of God a little bit more than what she did, but ultimately we both were saved together. We both went to church together. You know, she actually was baptized before I was. So we both found God together. Yeah. So to me, it was easier for us to build our relationship. The thing that was difficult about that, though, this was the difficult thing, was that, well, two things, actually. The first thing was me not being preachy towards her. Because of the fact that I knew I had a little bit of more knowledge about the Bible and about the gospel, I would try to be like, oh, well, you need to give it all to God. And if times were, you know, she was struggling with something like work. Oh, work was, you know, she was having a hard time at work or getting stressed out. And I'd be like, you know, just lay it all at God's feet. And she'd be like, I can't. Like, and I'm like, well, your faith isn't strong enough then. Like, I would do stuff like that. And I'm just like, ooh, now that I look back.
And I think that's a common kind of challenge and thing that you have to overcome in a Christian relationships. And like, for me, like, that can happen a lot too, because in my job, right, I preach on a regular basis, and I'm like trying to help other people, and there's like, and there's a like, I'm called to be a spiritual leader in my household, but there's a way you navigate that with your wife that's different than like somebody that's coming to you and asking for that. And so like, I've had to watch that too, because there's sometimes I will try to become like too like,
you make her sit down and be like,
or just like problem solving.
Pulls
like,
a podium out.
I can't let her tell me anything.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes like I'll get in this mode of like she's trying to tell me something, and I'm the whole time just trying to say solutions. Where like really a lot of this stuff she probably knows too. Like just maybe she just needs me to listen. Maybe she just needs me to pray with her. Like, and so like to be more gentle in that and not to be so like, oh, well, here's the solution. I know this. Because then that belittles in a way, too. And I've done that. I've made that mistake, you know, a lot in our marriage and even before our marriage, like, you know, just when we were dating as well. And so just learning to navigate that, to give space, like to be able to, it is different than the way if I have a student that comes and talks to me and wants me to help them walk through something the way I'm going to talk to them is different than how I'm going to walk through that with my wife.
And that's funny you say that, because my wife, she always, whenever we get into these conversations, she would always say, "You're talking down to me. Don't talk down to me. Like, talk to me."
Yeah.
And I'm just like, "I am talking to you." And she's like, "Are you?" And I'm like, "Okay, probably not." But I just
got to look forward to, single people.
See?
I'm kidding.
No, but I mean, that was just one of the struggles that we just had. I mean, and we still struggle with certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the dating life of a Christian, but just being married. I mean, you know, we've heard multiple stories, and we've had people, you guests on the podcast have talked about, you know, their relationships behind closed doors, or witnessing their family having a pastor or a preacher, a part of their family, but then at home behind closed doors, like there's abuse and stuff like that, you know. So there's always obstacles and issues and everything. But I think ultimately, I mean, we can all agree that the gospel is the answer. You know, God is the answer, and as long as we keep Him at the center, like, everything is well. But it's the process to get to there. Yeah. It's all that work that we do prior to that. And I mean, even if I'm gonna be completely transparent, like, I almost think that the reason my relationship, we found God together, was because of how much of like a sexual attachment I had to a woman, like, not just my wife, but like women in general, that I needed to find God with someone, because I desired that intimacy with someone, that I don't think I would have been able to find God and be single and date at the same time. I don't think I would have been able to live my life in the correct path. Because I mean, we're guys. You know, me and you talked about this on our other the other episode about, you know, we know where we were as teenagers, and what we, even though we thought we were, or you thought you, I'm gonna say you because it wasn't me, but even though you thought you were like one of the good teenagers, you still had those urges and those teenage feelings and stuff like that. And I think every man still has that. So I just think for me, it was just, I needed to find God with someone, because if I didn't, I think it would have been a lot more difficult to try to get to where I'm at now.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and then, you know, I said there's two things that were difficult, like, you know, going into the sexual desires and stuff like that, the sex life of a Christian. When me and my wife found God, we were dating. And I remember at the church that we were at, they had suggested that because we wanted to serve in other places, I had wanted to try youth, and my wife was, I think she was serving on the greeters or something, or hospitality, no, events. And they had told her, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. But when I had suggested doing youth, they told me no. And I had asked, and I'm like, we had maybe been going to church for 2 years, a year and a half maybe. And I had asked them why, and they had told me, well, because y'all two are living in sin. Me and her were living together and we weren't married. And they're like, you know, it's probably best if you move out. I think me and you talked about this.
We talked about it on the last one.
Yeah, in season 1, that they had told me, well, you should probably move out. And I'm like, I get where you're coming from. I get it. Yeah. But financially, at that time, I was like, there's no way. Yeah. There's no way we could pay for what we have now and me go. And they're like, oh, well, can you find someone that would just let you, like, sleep on the couch? Or why don't y'all just hurry up and get married? And to me, I was just like, why rush it? Because at that time, it wasn't about doing the right thing for God. It was, oh, I love her. I don't think that us being sexual with each other, because I know I'm going to marry her, you know, I don't think that there was a need to wait. But it got to a point to where we agreed that we were not going to be sexually active until we got married, and it took 2 years. And so for 2 years, I lived with my wife, then my girlfriend, and we lived together, and for 2 years, nothing. And it was difficult at first, but then it got to a point to where it became easier, because now our relationship with God was growing, that those tools were just becoming a easier way for us to deal with that in our lives. But what ended up happening was, we talked about this as well, is I went 2 years without sexual contact, living with a woman, and it was all emotions. So we were all about emotions, that when we did get married and we did, you know, finally, you know, have that fun that we had been waiting for, I got to a point where I was like, you know, I realized, like, I don't need it all the time. And when we would get mad at each other, that's when like porn would sneak in, you know, and then, you know, that addiction that every guy battles with that, you know, I realized, well, I don't need it physically from her because I went 2 years without it. So I would just get upset or get mad and frustration. And of course that my outlet was, you know, ended up creating a porn addiction. And that ultimately killed my relationship, my marriage. That almost killed my marriage, you know? Yeah. And that was something that I struggled with for a while. And, you know, we talked about covenant eyes and even having that, you know, and we talked about, hey, it worked, but when it was,
until it did.
When it worked as long as you had it on your phone, because there was times when I would delete it and just turn it back on. And like you said, the person who had covenant, the other app would see you delete it and be like, hey, bro, like what happened? Like what was going on there? So I think that's a difficult situation that you have to look at too as, it was easy for me to come into a relationship with my wife and find God, but it was also difficult for me to keep that relationship while seeking God because of that.
Yeah. And I think I probably fall like on somewhere on a different part of the spectrum than both of you on this. So my wife and I, like, we started dating. We were talking a little before we hopped on and started recording, but like I was 17, she was 15. We were younger, high school, right? We talked about this a little bit in our other episode too, that like we were young when we started dating. And so we dated for 5.5 years before we got married. That's a long time, by the way, to date and to try to like abstain from, you know, from sexual activity. And so like, you know, in the early days of that, like it wasn't that hard because you're in high school and you're young and we had lots of boundaries from our parents and those sort of things and stuff. But like you date that long, you end up in different environments. We become more independent, like as we got to college age and we were on our own. And so then now it's no longer our, you know, us and our parents' decision. It's basically us alone holding ourselves accountable for this and, you know, and friends or whoever we would put around us. And so like, anyway, and so like that was a battle too. So I do think like dating in the Christian context, which is kind of where this started, like all the way back at like your early question, like I think it looks very different than what our world defines as typical of a dating relationship, right? Because in our culture, dating for that long, it would be totally normal to participate in whatever kind of activities together, right? Like, and so, but for us, like, even though we knew we were getting married, we knew all of those things, like we had chosen to honor God in the way that we did this. And I'm by no means going to say that was easy, right? Like, but it was something that we had committed to, and there were, you know, challenges and stuff along the way, but you know, it definitely is a different walk, right, than what our world would consider normal in a relationship today. So.
Yeah. I just think that a lot of people who are, I'll use the term baby Christians because we used it earlier, but either baby Christians or newly on their walk or on the fence, I don't think they quite understand the importance of waiting, you know, the importance of, or exactly what is happening because of, you know, like I said, society has kind of deemed sexual activity as a common thing. It's happening with younger kids in younger ages now. I mean, sex sells. Everything that you watch on TV, from a commercial to a TV ad to a preview for a movie, like it's all that sex. And so it just becomes a common way of life. And, you know, and then you got those people who kind of, I got to test drive it before I buy it kind of thing. Like, what if, and I'm just saying, like, and I get it because I thought that I thought that way too before my relationship with God. Like, I thought that way. Like, it would make no sense for me to wait, and then if I end up getting in a relationship with someone, and that being, of course, it's going to be a big part of a relationship. If that just didn't work out, like, you know, you wasted all your time.
Well, and I think too that though is our world has misunderstood what sex is and what is divine and what makes sex great. It is so much more than just physical, right? So like, because that whole like test drive it before you buy it thing is all about like, does it physically like good enough for you or whatever, right? But like, if the actual like love and intimate relationship that comes from a man and wife is there, like that bond that comes through sex is so much farther beyond just like physically how good it is or whatever, right? Like, and so I think that like that is just because our culture is so sexualized, right? Like we think about it all about just pleasure and not this and like physical pleasure, but instead it really is like this like emotional, mental, physical, like spiritual connection that God designed for a man and wife. And so
that's so good.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, I think you know, one of the things when getting into the just the dating part of it, you know, I had asked you about would you try to find someone who was evenly yoked with you, or if it wasn't. If now I was put into the situation, I would assume that I would try to find someone who was evenly yoked.
Yeah.
But I think it would just be because of the fact of I wouldn't trust myself with someone who didn't kind of approach the relationship with the same ideas.
And I can attest to that because like, so like in high school, right? Like, so like I said, we were 17 and 15 when my wife and I started dating. And I dated before her, like she had like one, I give her a hard time, like used to when we were younger. Now we never talk about it hardly, but like she had dated one person for like 2 weeks before me, right? Like she really had, in all reality, not really dated before us. I was a little bit older, and I was a dude, and like was different. Like, and so like I had dated some before, but in several of those relationships, like I had dated people that weren't. That, you know, maybe they were Christians, but they were not equally, like it wasn't something that was extremely important to them or foundational. And in much shorter relationships, faced way more temptation than I did in our 5.5-year relationship because
it was one-sided.
Yeah, because it is. Because, like, you're not going to be able to, no matter how bad you want to, like, stay pure or remain, you know, celibate or whatever, like, you know, term you want to use there, like, if you're the only one in the relationship that wants to do that, that's only going to last so long. Like, you know, and so like it needs to, like, like I said earlier, it was super hard for us and we both wanted that. Like, and so imagine how hard it is and basically impossible, you know, whenever one person in the relationship's not on the same page. And so I think that's where, like, in dating especially, like, it's important. Like, I do think, like you were saying earlier, like, sure, if, you know, I went to school and studied Christianity. Like, if I had done that and hadn't met my wife yet, it's not like I have to date somebody that's got a biblical studies degree and, like, you know, on the same, like, you know, maybe that, like, understands all of the nuances of every little thing, but somebody who loves the Lord, who's a Christian, who wants to follow God, that is wanting to learn more, like he was talking about earlier, that has a passion or a zeal, like, to know God and to want to know more about him. I think that's important.
So not necessarily like a theological level.
Yeah, because I don't even think that that's necessarily what that passage of Scripture is speaking to, that, like, your knowledge level is exactly the same. I think it's that for one, that you both have a relationship with God and that you're both seeking to honor God and glorify God in what you do. And so, like, we're all going to fall at different you know, levels of knowledge and understanding and where we're at in that walk and being sanctified. And so, yeah.
Do you think that, John, going into a dating relationship now would you see it the same way that, like, how I approached it? Would you think that going into someone and finding God with someone would be easier for you, or you think just dating someone who's a part of a church?
So, like, in a sense, like, kind of like finding someone kind of seeking together, or like finding someone at church and, like, she's already got probably the latter. And I think the reason why is, like I said, I just know myself, and I know, like, kind of like my story and my testimony, what I've been through. Like, there was a period of time where, like, I depended on, like, another woman to help me in that. And it was tough. It was like my previous relationship, like, I wasn't even the one that was leading that. Like, at certain points when it came to the faith, she was.
Oh, wow.
And, like, that was, like, the toughest thing for me, because she would want to go to church. I would feel guilty about not wanting to go. And in reality, it was a lot of past hurt from, like, churches and stuff like that. But, like, she was the one who had the faith. And, like, although, like, I was coming around and we were pushing to the Lord together, like, now, John 2023, like, where I am right now with the Lord and my relationship is so personal and intimate that I would have had this no other way. Like how I am and like being single and able to walk with him, like I've gotten to understand him and know him. And it's been beautiful. So like when it comes, like I believe that when I come around to that woman that the Lord has meant for me to be with, is that she's already going to have her own walk. She's going to already face like the tribulations, the tests that the Lord has probably either placed in front of her path or has come onto her. But like I believe like we're going to meet, and it's like we're both going to already have like our individual walk and history, and we're going to come together for the Lord, but not come together to the Lord.
Gotcha.
So, like I would prefer that way, because just like she's already gonna be on a strong foundation.
Yeah.
And like I'm going to be on my strong foundation.
That's good.
And I think I love to hear like the fact that that it's even like a foundational thing for you when you're thinking about a relationship, because so like coming from the background of working with teenagers, like they all like think about relationships, want to be in relationships, whatever. But like so rarely is that even a factor like in their mind, right? Like they don't even consider. It's like, is she cute? I'll use that word. That's not the word they use, but like, you know, whatever. Cause
she fly?
But,
Do
yeah.
they still say fly?
Like, yeah. Like, and so like they just like, I don't think so, but you know, and so, but they're thinking about looks. They're thinking about like popularity. They're thinking about those sorts of things, right? Or like, do we have any kind of common interest or whatever, like whether it be sports or whatever it might be. Like they think about all those factors, but very rarely do I see teenagers like actually like consider, and honestly, even beyond teenagers, like when I was in college, the same thing too, right? Like, yeah, like it was
my
like
age too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, and so like it's just so to me, like to see, and I know some other people that was, you know, my brother-in-law, my wife's younger brother. They're engaged. They're getting married in a few months, and but he is like one of the like greatest examples to me of somebody who truly like lived out self-control in a way that like I couldn't even really wrap my head around. Like, so like he did not date in high school, did not date until he met his now fiance, like because his standards were so high. Of like, she's got to be somebody that like that has that foundation of belief in God and trust in God, and like that's going to come, because he's also going to go into ministry, and so like he wanted somebody that was going to come alongside in that and support in that. Yes. And so he waited. Where like I think that's something we don't see in our culture anymore. Like you might have some kind of values or whatever, but people will quickly give that up for somebody who looks good. Like, you know what I mean? And like it'll go out the window like in a heartbeat. And so I think we need more and more of that in our culture to see people begin to value this relationship, because, you know, we wonder why, you know, divorce rates and all of these sort of things are like through the roof. And like, it's a lot of that. I think there's all sorts of other factors, right? But like, I think one big part of that is we have less and less marriages and homes built on a foundation of faith. And so like that is something that like for me and my wife, like divorce has never been an option. Like I don't care how bad it, like we've gone through really tough times. You know, we got married in our early 20s, like, you know what I mean? We've been broke a lot in our marriage. And so like, you know, I'm in ministry. Like she just became a teacher in the last couple of years. She was a teacher's aide before that. Like, you know, we've gone through tough times, but like divorce was never an option because we have this foundation that God brought us together. We have this shared faith. And so we're going to work through it. Like, and we've stayed connected too. Like we talked about the importance of this earlier too, but, that like the importance of the community of the church. And that's something that's been there to support us the whole way too. And so like, I think that's foundational for relationships.
Bro, like I couldn't agree more. I think it's like when I look at like someone to date, like I'm not considering someone who isn't walking with that foundation. Yeah. Like there's grace that, like, you know, in your own individual walk out, like there's grace if we mess up. But I think there is something to be said about the fear of the Lord when it comes not necessarily to fearing him, but like there's a part of the fear of the Lord where like we honor the rules that he set in place because we love him. And like when you come from a place of the fear of the Lord, like, Lord, I love you, so I will obey. Like that needs to be in her heart as well. So it's like we're not engaging in sex, or we're not engaging in sex before marriage because we're afraid of the discipline that God might bring, or we're afraid of what's going to happen. Like, we're doing this because we love you. And also, like, there's a certain favor that comes into a relationship for being pure. Like, it's like it says in Scripture, the Lord is coming back for a purified, clean bride. Yeah. And, like, we need to be that purified, clean bride. Yeah. And so, like, why would I expect my wife not to have that, well, that person I'm dating not to have that same kind of mindset? And, like, you know, you get married and you keep that purity and you come out, like, I've seen it time and time and again in relationships. Like, not that those that didn't do that won't have favor, but I've seen those relationships that had contended for that come out with that favor on the other end, where they're operating in that anointing and they're doing spectacular things for God that you can really wrap your head around. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they contended for that in that waiting season. Yeah. And I think that's so important. And that's what I want, you know?
I will say this, that even after finding God and even after creating the relationship and understanding, okay, this is the foundation that I'm going to work off of my relationship, it's staying in prayer about it. Because, I mean, too many times now we see on TV of pastors divorcing and pastors, you know, either cheating on their wives or they're, you know, being unfaithful or something. And you will see these pastors forgive, you know, their wives forgive them and vice versa and everything. But then you also see these pastors who divorce and that's the end of their relationship. And I think that almost kind of gives a bad, leaves a bad taste in the mouth of those who are on the fence of Christianity. Because you're like, you know, okay, hey, I'm gonna follow this new lifestyle and I'm going to live this new lifestyle. But the person who's preaching to me from the pulpit ain't even following the rules, of the, you know, the rules or the word that they're feeding to me. Yeah. And so I think, like, as a Christian and as a disciple and as a person who is living the word of God, we need to hold ourselves accountable as men to be able to say, like, hey, you know what? I am starting to feel these urges. I am starting to find myself in a situation where I'm putting myself into a situation where maybe something could happen, a work romance or someone from the church. I mean, time and time again, we've seen people create relationships and you know, with other people in the church. Yeah. And I think that's something as men that we need to stand up and be like, okay, hey, you know, that's not okay. We need to figure that out. With porn, I mean, we talk about that, you know, porn being a big issue with men. And I can see why some people on the outside of this lifestyle can see, like, okay, well, what's the big deal about it? But it's so much more deeper than just, like you said, the physical aspect of it. Like that instant pleasure that's that quick, you know, we talked about this in previous episodes where we live in a type of society where everything's like, I want it now.
Yeah, it's a microwave society.
Microwave society. Yeah. I want to be pleased now. I want food now. Yeah. I want to find information now. And, you know, that's something that we kind of got to, I think, spread the word on. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have this episode and I wanted to talk about this topic, because I feel like it is a big issue. And not just with the people in the congregation that sit in the back, but the people who are up on stage as well.
Yeah, and I was, to that, like, being in that sort of role, being in a pastoral kind of role, like, your first ministry is to your family, right? Like, and so, like,
110%.
And so, like, our pastor has this sign in his office, and he'll remind us of this pretty often. But on his one of his shelves in his office has a sign that says, I may missay this a little bit, but basically, you're a child of God forever. You're you're part of your family for life, and you're a employee of this church for now. Like, so don't get those things out of order. Remember, like, you know what I mean? Like, so remember, like, you are a child of God forever. Like, and then you also have a responsibility to minister, to lead your family for your entire life. You happen to work at this church right now. Like, you know what I mean? So don't let this thing be the reason why you neglect your family and neglect that ministry there. And I think that's so good, because when people do that, they think that they're devoting everything to this because it's what they're supposed to do. And oftentimes they'll cost themselves that ministry. I mean, we see this time and time again with, you know, these pastors that have kind of fallen from grace, so to speak, you know, as they've had these big controversies, these big scandals. And so as I think about that, like, it's, you know, a lot of times they got themselves into that situation by pouring themselves so much into that pastoral ministry, like thinking that they were doing the right thing, but they neglected their family, and that begins to cause a division between them and their wife, and then they start looking for fulfillment somewhere else, and they, or whatever, and so, like, it's the dangerous thing. So, like, I think God created an order to these things for a reason, and so it's important that we keep that order in place, and I think that really leads to healthy relationships on all those levels as well. So.
I think one of the things that guys need to take into account too, and this is all guys, or even women too, is that love languages is, I mean, we talked about this before as well. Love languages, like, I think one of the biggest things that, if I could give any piece of information to a newlywed, is that women want to be loved and men want to be respected. A man is going to feel more like a man when you respect him, and a woman's going to feel more like a woman when you love her. And so when a woman tries to love a man unconditionally without giving him respect, that kind of puts off a man. And then vice versa. When a man is just respecting a woman and not showing her love, that's going to push her away. And one of the things about the love languages is that if you don't know how your significant other or the person you're dating or the person you're talking to receives love, like, they're never going to understand it to the extent of how you're giving it. Yeah. Word of affirmation, 110%. You telling me I'm doing a good job, or
you're doing a good job.
Hey, see, I love that, man. That just puts me on an all-time high. But if you go and acts of service or quality time, you sitting on the couch right here, it just doesn't do it for you. So you gotta
talk nice to you.
You gotta love someone the way that they receive love, because if you're dating someone and her love language is quality time, but your love language is receiving gifts. And so you're going to show her love by giving her gifts, because that's how you receive love. A gift may mean nothing to her. That was the situation with my wife. And she's going to, I know that she'll laugh when she hears this, but for the longest, I'm a gift giver. Yeah. I like pride myself on buying gifts. Yeah. And so I would always try to go like above and beyond and give my wife like the greatest gifts. And I mean like really good gifts. Yeah. And not just expensive, but like meaningful. And she would open it and she'd be like, "Oh, thank you." Amen. And I'm just like, "It's okay. Why are you not crying right now?" Yeah. Why are you not tearing up?
So much thought into this.
Like, do you realize how long that took me? And it just, but because gifts isn't her love language. Like, that's not, I could tell my wife all day, like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. Like, you look so pretty today, blah, blah, blah." But if I'm not showing her quality time or like physical touch, she's going to be like, do you not, and she may be joking, but do you not love me anymore? And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Do you not think I'm pretty enough? I just told you were gorgeous." "Yeah, but you didn't even give me a hug today." And I'm just like, but that's because that's the way she receives love. Yeah. And I think that's something very, very important when entering a relationship, because that right there is just how you get across how much you love someone.
Yeah, because and sometimes that's something that takes time, right? Like like I said, like my wife and I, we've been together a long time, coming up on 12 years that we've been dating later this year, and then in a month or two, a couple months, we'll hit or about a month and a half, we'll hit our.
Don't get it wrong.
Yeah, I'm good with dates. She's the one that forgets dates. So, but we'll hit 6 years of being married. But like in that time, right? Like you slowly start to figure out more of that stuff, because like in the beginning, like I would do stuff like that. I'm like, why is this not like getting through? And I know that she was doing the same thing too, right? Like she's just like, for her, like, acts of service is one of like her love language. But like, I never think to like wash the dishes to show that I like love. Yeah, I don't either.
That's my least favorite love language.
But it seems to be very common amongst women. They really they have that one a lot. Yeah, and so like, but for me, like, I don't think about that. Like if she, does something at the house for me or whatever, like I appreciate it, but I'm not like, I didn't notice that as like, like a lovely. And so we're like, I'm the same way as you. Like with gifts, like, man, I would put all this effort in. And like, she will probably get mad at me for saying this, but like my wife's not the best gift receiver in the world. And so she's learned to like wait, because oftentimes like her first reaction is not very good to something. Like it doesn't matter like what it is. She's just, I don't know if it's just like an uncomfortable moment for her or whatever. Like
it becomes awkward.
Yeah. We're like, I don't mind receiving gifts, because like, I guess that's one of my love languages is receiving. So like, it didn't bother me at all. Like I feel like I can express my thanks or whatever. Yeah. Cool. And so, but like, so I didn't understand that. Like, and so like there were lots of like birthdays and Valentine's and Christmas and stuff where I'm like mad, like after the gift opening process is over because she like didn't really care. She was like, all right, thanks. Like, or like, man, I kind of like that, but like, could you have done this? Or done, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I put so much thought, like we're like, but she wasn't thinking about it that critically, you know what I mean? And so I had to like get that chip off my shoulder a little bit, but like, and so I think
I feel you.
That's something important, especially like, in more of that dating stage to like be more aware than I was at that point. Like, cause I could have probably saved myself some heartache and like
money.
in the, yeah, exactly. I could have simplified some of that stuff. Like, so I did learn one thing. Like, I bought my wife roses one time before we were married, and like she was like, "Why did you spend so much money on this?" I bought her dozen. I didn't buy her flowers again for like 6 years. She was like,
and then she gets
like,
mad. How come you don't ever get roses?
Yeah. So she was like, "You didn't give me flowers." I was like, "You ruined that one." I was like, "But now it's
true,
back
man.
to that." But no,
like I could have easily gone home and washed the dishes, and it would be the same thing as if I proposed to my wife all over again.
Exactly.
And she would just be like, "You wash the dishes?"
Yeah, I would much rather spend money, by the way, than wash
yeah, me
dishes.
too.
But apparently
Bro.
that doesn't work the
Yes.
same. So.
Yeah. From a single guy, I have no idea what y'all talking about. But I think a part of me, like watching and being like mentored by some, a man that's in like a healthy like relationship. Like by no means is it perfect, but like the synopsis that I've seen is like, you're dying to yourself daily. Like when I feel like when the Lord says like, take up your cross and die to your flesh. Like, I feel like that applies, yes, to following Him, but like also dying to like some like your own desires.
Yeah.
And from what it sounds like, what both of you saying, like it's a daily thing.
It is.
And also from what it sounds like, you got to be free of offense.
Yeah.
That's
just
probably one of the
difficult.
biggest ones.
It's difficult all the way around, bro.
Yeah. So
And
those
But
are
it's
two.
rewarding.
Yeah.
Definitely rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I know some of that stuff can sound like negative, but like,
Yeah.
but I think, but it's not like, it's not all negative. Like there's growing pains or whatever in every relationship. But I do think like as time goes on, like there's lots of joy and like there are things that like I couldn't imagine going through so much that I've gone through in the last 12 years without my wife. Like, you know what I mean? And there's been so much joy and like, and then now getting to have our daughter and raising her together, like, and getting to see her in this new role as a mother, like, man, the more that I see this happen, because I didn't see that, we talked about this a little bit in my episode. I didn't grow up like in a normal, like, biblical family structure. My parents were never together in a relationship a day in my life. And so I didn't have that kind of example. But now to begin to see God's design for a relationship and for a family play out, like in my own family, like
breaking chains.
Yeah, it's like, man, it makes me excited. It makes me begin to like really understand why God designed things this way, to see like that my daughter's gonna, and not to say that we're perfect, right? She's gonna see our flaws too, but still like to get that she's gonna get to be raised and see both of her parents loving God, honoring God, loving her, like, raising her in a godly household like that. Like I'm excited about, that, and it really does. It makes those passages. That's why I don't shy away from teaching those passages on marriage and stuff to our students, because, man, I think this generation desperately needs to hear what God's designed. Well, that's like most youth pastors will like. I won't say most youth pastors, but some like will skip over stuff like that because like, I don't really want to talk about marriage structure to teenagers because they're not getting married yet. But like a lot of them don't have examples of biblical marriage in their life, and so to see that and to see God's design for it, man, I think is something that's desperately needed in this generation. So.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So this is something that I've always, and this is just getting y'all's opinion on it. So when in a relationship, whether it be married or dating, and your significant other or the other person were to cheat or to do something, it could be an affair or just a disagreement. The fact of getting divorced and remarried and stuff like that. Like, I know you said that divorce is never an option for you and your wife, but that's because y'all are both in y'all's walk right now. Mm-hmm. So like with me having two previous relationships with two, and having kids with those two previous relationships, I know like coming into a church, I felt like, man, I got to come in and then me to be vulnerable and tell these people like, man, I got 3 kids from 3 different women. Like, I didn't want to be looked on and be judged. And I think a lot of the misconception is that at least this is how I think, and that's why I asked for y'all's opinion, is that, like, to me, if God wasn't at the center of that relationship when it first started, the opportunity of finding that relationship may not be it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that because you and your person that you're with, y'all did not know God, that relationship would never work, because me and my wife didn't, and we found God together. But I think that's why it's very important to even people who are in the dating scene, that if you're not going to church, to find a church and to start going to church. And I know some people who are dating can kind of look at it and be like, man, I can tell you right now, there's no way that we would be able to go to a church and stop being sexual with one another, just because it's a big part of our life and we're young and, stuff like that. But if people would understand that the closer that you get to God and that the more that you begin to fall in love with Him, the easier those kind of things become. Almost like you said for you, like it's been because you've lived the life of dating and not being fully devoted to God, and now you're living the life of dating and being fully devoted to God. Your priorities have changed. And so me putting that out there for those who are looking at it that way, coming back into the question again, of whether you being unfaithful or your spouse being unfaithful, what is your opinion on being able to overcome that, if you even can?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a difficult question. Like, and in like my particular relationship, like I almost like can't even imagine that happening, right? But I do like,
Well, let's just say if you were to give it advice to someone who came to you.
Yeah, for sure. And so like, I think when you have like when that happens within a biblical foundation of marriage, I think that there's more clear path on reconciliation and trying to find like what caused those things, where can grace be extended in this, where can reconciliation happen. But I think that's a challenging thing. But to like the other part of your question too, like how to kind of handle when someone comes into the church with a background of divorce or whatever. I do think what has happened in relationships prior to your relationship with Christ is a different conversation, a different category, because I think like as Christians, like our job is not to hold people who aren't Christians to a Christian standard, right? Like that's not, like God has this expectation for the people. When Paul's writing to Corinth, he knows all the craziness that's happening in Corinth. He's not talking about like that how terrible they are. He's addressing issues within the church, right? And then like the goal for how you interact with the people outside the church is to tell them the gospel, allow them to meet Christ, and allow that to begin to convict them, change their hearts, draw them to them. And so like that's because the thing is, until you know God, why does what God cares about matter to you? Like, you know what I mean? And so
that's good.
So I think that's kind of the foundation there. So like as far as people who have had, separations, divorces, or kids or whatever, those sort of things in relationships before their relationship with Christ, I think there's like ample room for grace there, because like you didn't know the Lord then, like you didn't, and then I think even for people, which extremely, like, I mean, I have a younger sister who we have different dads. Like I mentioned, like my parents were never together in my lifetime, right? Like, and so like I grew up in that kind of household. So like, even though like I'm not, currently in that sort of relationship, like I know what it's like to walk into church with a blended family and like split family, and it was obvious with us. My sister's mixed, so like my and so she's black and white, and so like it was obvious, like we did not look. They knew.
You got
and,
so
like,
excited about
yeah.
that.
So that's why I'm on the Black History Month podcast, and so
You gotta tie in.
but no, and so but yeah, so like it was obvious, right, that like we're a family, but like. And even now, right? Like my mom and my sister come to like attend. They're members at Calvary now. They just moved down here recently in the last little over a year and a half ago now. And so, like, obviously, right? That means that there's a background there, that a story. So I think there's room for grace and for reconciliation and to draw people back to those places. Like the thing is none of us have walked perfectly in God's design for us. So I think there's room for grace. There's room for the church to wrap their arms around people like that. I think that's where the church has failed so often, is being able to acknowledge sin while also loving someone and walking them through that reconciliation process.
That's good.
Like the church is not there just to tell you what you did wrong. The church is to put their arm around you and say, no, hey, this is what God's design is, and we want to walk with you through this now. And so I think that's important.
That's exactly it.
That's
I think
good.
Yeah.
condemnation with the church is pretty tough.
Yeah.
So, and they coming from like a mom who, through 25 years of marriage, was cheated on.
Yeah.
And the church that we were at, like, wanted her to stay in that marriage for, like, the upkeep of the church. Because he was an elder. My dad was an elder of the church. And, like, having, like, her being, feeling trapped in that situation was just so tough, like, mentally and spiritually on her. Like, where she wasn't the one that was committing adultery the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, he was. And, like, even dates back, like, in the Bible, like, the law of Moses, like, adultery is one of those things, like, okay, like.
Yeah, you can. There is a path to
There
divorce.
is a
like,
path
yeah.
to divorce.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, like you were saying, just, like, avoiding that condemnation and helping someone walk through, because you don't know what they've been through in that time period.
Yeah, like, and it's complicated, right? Like, you know, like my mom has been divorced, but, like, we talked about in the earlier podcast that I was on, like, there's abuse in the home. There was also, I didn't mention this, but there was also infidelity. Like, you know, there was cheating and stuff. So, like, you know, like, you don't know everyone's story. Like, so I do think, like, there is time, like, when the church has situations like that presented to them, to be understanding, to be compassionate, to be gracious, to meet people where they are and still speak truth in that. But there's a way to do that lovingly and walking alongside people.
Oh, yeah.
So.
That's good. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all coming on. I appreciate y'all being vulnerable and speaking on a subject that some men may find a little bit uncomfortable. And, you know, to me, I think the conversation doesn't get talked about as much as it should.
Right.
So I appreciate both of y'all coming back. I'm sure we're going to have y'all back again on another episode. Either one of y'all mind praying out? John, you want to pray us out?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for just allowing us to be a guest on Charles' show. We just thank you for that every word was spoken. And Holy Spirit, we just ask that if it wasn't your words, that it just drop and be felt on deaf ears. And we thank you for getting an opportunity to talk about some of the things that needs to be brought to light and needs to be placed in a healthy position, not only for us, but for the people that are watching. Father, I ask that you bless everyone that's here, everyone that's watching on the other side. And we thank you, Jesus. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right.
Quick question before we cut.
Yeah.
Any tattoos since the last time y'all been on?
No.
Bruh.
Next tattoo sponsored by Save and Tatted, y'all.
Next one,
Save
we're
and
gonna,
Tatted.
look, we're going to have
I
a
need
tattoo
it.
artist here. And if someone doesn't have a tattoo, you're getting one.
Do I get to pick the artist?
On the face. Tattoo on the face.
Wait, on the face is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Peace out.
Awesome.
Yes, that's the answer. So.
Hey, guys, welcome to the Saved and Tatted podcast. I'm Charles Turrubiate, your host. I got two more of my buddies that came back. Glad to have them back here. John, Micah, welcome. Man, that was horrible too,
us.
guys. I don't like that. George, it's starting. It's happening.
It's getting too big.
No, it's happening. It happened last time, remember? No, it just got really awkward, and then people just stared at me, and it made it worse. Everyone's looking at me right now. Look, this is weird. I need everyone to close their eyes. Okay?
Only use that camera.
No one look at me. As soon as I get done talking, then y'all can open y'all's eyes. All right, yeah, y'all pray for me. Hey, guys.
Hey, it's George again. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned that Radio Faith is working towards launching 2 new shows this year. Radio Faith is a company that produces Christ-centered content that makes an impact at the intersection of the church and culture. Saved and Tatted moves that mission forward through the raw conversations that Charles has with his guests. These 2 new shows we're working on will provide the same type of space for these type of raw conversations, but in a more nuanced way. The first show will be about sports and the second will be about music. Both sports and music are a large part of cultures around the world. We want to provide digital content that engages these areas of interest and connects both sports fans and music fans to God. To stay up to date on when these shows will be released, subscribe to Saved and Tatted and then jump over to the Radio Faith YouTube channel and subscribe there as well. Thanks again for supporting us along the way. I hope you have a great day. God bless.